I worship you. I worship you. You are here working in this.
Something, it means like when we give something up or to allow something else to go or to just give way to something or to be submit or to comply or agree with something else because of pressure.
Ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth fruit, bringeth forth fruit, much fruit. For without me, you can do nothing.
Amen.
Amen.
So what we see here is that Christ is telling us that He's the source, He's the foundation for us, and we build on His foundation because we're the branches. And then when we agree with Him and we have Him and His word in our hearts, then we're able to yield fruit or to give up fruit, as in to give fruit, which is a product, which shows the work of what we've been doing, the product of what we've been doing. And without Him, we won't be able to do that. Amen.
Amen.
So today we're going to look at one example, Moses, and we have to first talk about where he spent his first 40 years, and then after we talk about his other 40 years. So he spent his first 40 years in the comfort of the palace, where he was like as he was treated as a Egyptian prince, and he was treated royally because he was part of that family. And the thing that comes with all of that is that he would have learned a lot of things. He would have, over those 40 years, he would have learned everything that they can possibly teach academically in Egypt. And on top of that, being part of the royal family would also bring pride or bring arrogance, or it brings a lot of things. And we all know that God wanted to use Moses for his plan. So for God to use Moses for his plan, he would have to make a huge change for he would have to make a huge change to make Moses ready to carry out what God has set for him. So he went from being in the royal courts with Pharaoh to the to near a river in the desert. So he went from living in the high courts, in the royal courts, to spending his life in the desert. And the reason why God made this huge change for him and he put him through, he basically grew in those deserts for another 40 years. So that's after he fled. So God had to bring him down so that he could strip him completely of everything that he knows or everything that he has, so that he'll be able to build Moses up the way he wants to build him up, and then be able to use him the way he wants to use him. So God knows what he wants to use Moses for, and he can see that yes, Moses has all the anything he can learn academically in Egypt. He has all the wealth, power, whatever he had while being with the royal family. But God knows that that's not what he wants. That's not what he needs to fulfill what he has set his life for. So God knows what Moses needs. So he had to bring Moses to the circumstance that will take away all what he doesn't need, and then be able to build him up and give him what he does need to fulfill his the path that God has set for him. So Moses, he spent a long time, 40 years under Pharaoh, learning all the wisdom he could learn, the different ways they can use tools that men have created. Like he basically learned everything that he would need to know if he had continued living there. And God had to bring Moses out and take him to the desert wilderness again for 40 years to strip him of all of that and basically bring him down. So he went from being a prince to being a shepherd that was minding the sheep of minding some. He was the shepherd of someone else's sheep, which was his father-in-law. He was minding his sheep, and his wife was just a ordinary desert woman, like a woman from the desert who will take care of her father's sheep as well. Whereas staying in Egypt, staying in Egypt, he could have. There's many young like royal maidens that he could have married in Egypt, but God didn't want that for him. He didn't want that sort of life for him. He needed to bring him down so that he can do what God wants him to do, and that's why he brought him out there, put him in the desert, and let him live that same life. So we can now later see the like firstly we'll talk about how God stripped him down. So he humbled him by bringing him out there, showing him that basically everything that he had in Egypt while he's in the wilderness, there's nothing he can claim that's his fault. The sheep that he's minding, that he's being a shepherd for the sheep that were his father-in-law's. So everything he had in Egypt didn't matter anymore because he's now in the wilderness where he can't use those things, and he didn't bring them away in Egypt because he had to run. So God stripped him of all the physical things. Then God had to strip him of his personalities or traits that God didn't need to for him to fulfill what God has set out for him. So that was like pride or anything else. And we can see how this worked out when God called him from the burning bush and told him to go talk to Pharaoh and all that. We can see Moses was uh, scared. He didn't want to do it. He had a speech impediment. He was stuttering, and you see, like scientists always tell us that stuttering comes from when a person has a fear or they don't have confidence in something or something happened in the past or whatnot. So we see God brought him down to the level where he was completely humble and didn't have uh, that pride anymore because now he lacked. So he got rid of Moses' pride, and then God would later build up his confidence for him without pride. So that's why God had to break him down so much so that he could give him confidence that's holy, one that doesn't have pride. So he had to remove everything, including the pride that he had from before. And that's why we see that Moses was scared to approach Pharaoh or do like what God asked him to do, and then he had to send him Aaron to help him. So a lot of the things that we see with Moses is that God, God needed to remove everything, and like he had to show more means to be under by taking care of his father-in-law's sheep and all of that, so that he can know how to lead those type of people. And if he didn't experience uh, the life of the people that follow, then he's not going to be able to be uh, a great leader, if that makes sense. So God had to show him the two sides of the coin. He had to show him the lesser side first so that he can understand the position and understand how to fulfill the higher side. And all this wouldn't have been possible he if God didn't bring him out to the wilderness to remove all the traits that the Egyptians had given him. Amen.
Amen.
So what this ties into yielding is that Moses allowed God to do this. Moses gave way for God to do this. He allowed God to change his life. He allowed God to mold and shape him. And we've seen that when God removed the pride and then the confidence and then the self-confidence, it meant that Moses, when God removed the down to the self-confidence, it meant that Moses couldn't rely on himself because he didn't have the confidence to. So he had to rely on God. And then from relying on God, God would give him strength to start doing what he's asked him to do. And when he continues working at what God has asked him to do, that will give him confidence. For he'll be confident in the strength of the Lord, not confidence in himself. And that's the confidence that God wanted to teach him. He wanted to teach him confidence in God's strength, not his own strength, which would be pride. So that was God's plan here. That's why God puts us through trials and different things. He wants to remove certain things in our lives so that he can give us better things or the more righteous version of those things. And Moses' life was a great example of this. So when we look at Moses' life, all this was only possible because he allowed himself, he yielded and he gave way to God's will to 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 manifest itself in his life. And we also see, for example, Paul as well. Paul Paul had the people that were also persecuting the Christians liked him because he was one that would hold the goats. He was one that was always going out to persecute the Christians and whatnot. And we see that Paul had a high social standing because of this, because this is what the people, the general public wanted, and he was at the very front of this movement of taking out the Christians. So of course people would like him and he'd have a high social standing, but God had to bring him out on a journey where he would lose his sight. So without him being able to see, he can't see the Christians that he wants to go and persecute. He can't see the clothes that he wants to help people hold. He can't see the he can't see the what was it, the praise that people want to give him because he's persecuting the Christians. So God had to take that away from him. He then had to bring him to get help or healed by the same people that he was persecuting. So he had to rely on the help of the people that follow God, who he was persecuting before. So that made him see a different light. God showed him a different thing. He took away what he didn't want in his life. And we see that Paul allowed God to do this once he met him. We see that Paul got the understanding and he yielded himself, he gave way for God to manifest his will in his life. And then we've seen the great wonders that Paul continued to do throughout his life. Paul also kept talking about how he has his own issues and God left them there so that God can continue using him and continue working on him and continue fixing him and molding him the way that he wants so that he can carry out the will that God has set aside for him. And the reason why God gives, like we've seen these examples, the reason why God gives us these weaknesses is so that we understand that he can take away all the strengths we have, everything that we pride ourselves on, everything that we have confidence on. He can take it away in an instant. And he gives us something else that will give us confidence in the strength that God has. Because when we lose what we have, what we believe is ours, then we have to rely on something else or someone else's strength. And then we'll have confidence in that person's strength rather than pride in what we believe is our own strength. So those are just examples of what it means to give way and what it means to yield to Christ. And the same thing can be done to us as well. We when God is taking us on a trial or it changes our circumstances, makes things difficult, we just need to allow God to do what he wants to do in our lives. And when we do that, we'll be able to draw on far more strength than we thought we had already. So we'll be able to fully complete what God has set us to do and use his strength to correct way, basically. Amen.
There is power